morning, everybody. Felix Luna, Henry L. Marsh with Comfort Systems of Virginia. Today we'll be talking about the Ultra Force High Efficiency State gas-powered water heaters. These are the water heaters that serve the kitchen in the school. So the water heaters themselves, they're high efficiency water heaters. They get fed through the bottom, through a cold water line, feeds the bottom of the water heater itself, goes through the water heater. The water heater is set at 140 degrees operating set temperature, and it'll also show you on the display the status of the water heater itself, the temperature of the set point, and the tank temperature at what it coming out of the outlet. The outlets come out at the top. They themselves have an isolation valve and a thermometer there where you can check and regulate the temperature of the water heater itself. They have your standard pop-off valve, and they also have a recirculating system and pump on them. Once the cold water is fed to the water heater, it goes through the water heater, comes out the top, feeds the kitchen. That isolation valve is up here at the very top of this line. If anything were to happen with the water heater, this small switch right in front of it, where it says enabled and disabled, you just switch that off. Once you switch that off, the status will read water heating disabled. That means that this water heater is now turned off. Once you turn it back on, it has a system repurge inside that will kick on. If for any reason something's going on with the gas, it will try to successfully ignite the burners inside 3 times. Once those 3 times are achieved and nothing happens, it will cut off the water heater itself. We turn that back on, goes back on standby, or if that temperature has gone under the set point, it will crank on the water heater, starting the gas burn to the water heaters and heating the water itself. The recirc pump attached to this water heater comes back from the kitchen to allow for a faster response on the water itself into the kitchen. So instead of waiting or having a lag for the heating water going into the kitchen, it's more faster, instantaneous. It'll go from the kitchen through your recirculating pump, through this isolation valve and check valve, which you can also regulate and look at your thermometer to see if it's properly heating. It'll go through your water heater and introduce itself back into the tank. This water heater has a neutralizing system on it as well. It comes from the bottom of your exhaust that come from the base of the water heater and go out onto the roof. It goes through the bottom of your trap into your acid neutralizing traps and into your nearest drain. On these water heaters, you also have your expansion tank that keeps the proper pressure inside the system itself. That is tied into your domestic cold water. Over here, we have your mixing valves that operate or control the heating water coming from the water heaters themselves and go into and serve the kitchen. These are Leonard thermostats. The top thermostat is the mixing valve that operates the main water going through the system and through your water heaters. The bottom mixing valve is the recirculating line and controls the amount of temperature and water going from the recirculating line and through your system, through your mixing valve, to give you a better range for optimal water heating in the system. These valves here cut off and isolate your hot water mixing valve, as well as the valve at the very top. If that valve at the top is closed and these three valves here are closed, you are now able to service and or replace both of these mixing valves if need be. When everything is done on the fixing and serving or maintenance of these mixing valves, put them back together and open the top valve, open the three bottom valves, and allow water back into the system. These valves on the very side of the mixing valves, these are also isolation valves as well, to control the flow from the recirculating line back into the main system itself, to give you a better control of the water temperature going through your mixing valves and your system. Then the very bottom, if need be, if any draining has to happen on this system because you need to maintenance or do any kind of addition to the system itself, these ports down here, once this is turned off, these are able to be taken off, a hose attached to them to your nearest drain, and then opening your valve to allow the water to drain from the system. All of the valves for this system are either readily accessible and located either above the water heater for the outlet of the hot water, at the base of the water heater for the inlet of the water. You turn these off and you cut off the cold water feed to the tanks themselves. These water isolation valves, we prefer you do not mess with them unless this needs to be serviced, because they are to be cracked at a 45-degree halfway point so that the recirculating line works properly. If you do need to service these water heaters, then you can go ahead and just close them to stop any extra water from backfeeding to your water heaters. But once you are done and complete with any of your issues or maintenance, go ahead and half crack it back to open. Aside from that, I think that's about all we have on these water heaters. Once again, they are gas fed. The gas, if there's any problem with the gas and the gas needs to be maintained, you are to follow these lines from the regulator back to this main line, where you will find a 2-inch isolation valve. If you were to turn that off, that cuts off both of the hot water heaters. If you just need to service one water heater, we also put auxiliary isolation valves at every run to the water heater. So if both water heaters do not have to be turned on, then you can either go to this isolation valve to be able to turn off this water heater, or this isolation valve to go ahead and turn off this water heater. That concludes the overview and any maintenance that really needs to be done with these water heaters. We can go ahead and transition over to our electrical water heaters. Now we're up at the G mechanical room, and we'll be talking about our electric water heater. The one in the mechanical room was gas, and these up here are electric. These can be cut off and turned on via this electrical disconnect. If anything were to go wrong with this for any reason, just grab the switch, turn it off, and you can do whatever you need to do to maintenance this unit and a piece of equipment. The main control of this disconnect is the power feeding the board and the water heater elements themselves to heat the water properly. Aside from that, this water heater has your standard stuff: your pop-off valve, your expansion tank, and your mixing station. as well as its isolation valves and thermometers to let you know at what temperature the tank is as well. Right here at the base of the water heater is your display. Your display is going to tell you the operating set point of the water heater itself, as well as the tank temperature of the water heater. This tank itself should be at 140 always, so that tank temperature should also be at 140. And temperature, if anything were to go wrong, just go hit the menu. Then you have your temperatures, your heating status, and you can see what's going on if it's in any alarm. Here, it'll tell you your status, whether it's on standby, whether it's operating, heating, or if it's disabled for any reason. And then you have your day, time, and what kind of mode it's on. On this water heater, this is your outlet going through and back to your mixing station from the water heater itself to your mixing station and out into the building. And at the very bottom, you have your cold water feed. Cold water feed comes through the building itself, out and into the bottom of your water heater. If for any reason this water heater needs to be serviced, you just turn off that cold water feed on that isolation valve, and you turn off your hot water feed isolation valve. Now that those are turned off, you can either drain the water heater itself through its hose port at the bottom, which can be turned off and on via a flathead screwdriver, turned off and ran to your nearest drain. Once that is tied into your drain and you're ready to drain it for any reason, you just go ahead and flip your pop-off valve, once again allowing air to enter the equipment and breaking that airlock so that it properly drains. And when you need to turn it back on, then you will turn off that hose bib, make sure that your pop-off valve is seated back, turn on your cold water feed, and then turn back on your hot water feed, and allowing the automatic aerators to do their jobs and take the air out of the system through either the fixtures inside the school or the automatic air vents themselves. The mixing station is pretty standard as well. You have your 3 isolation valves that control the feed into your mixing station. You have your 3 hose ports if any drainage of the system itself needs to occur. The top mixing valve controls the main temperature and the main water coming out of the water heater, and the temperature that is introduced into the school or the area that this water heater itself is servicing, which in this case, this water heater services area G, part of the common area, and area D under G. All of those restrooms, mop sinks, and any other fixtures tied into that system. The top one controls your main water, and the bottom one controls your recirculating water. Recirculating water is what's going to come from the back of the system at the very furthest fixture. That allows the water going through your system to have no lag behind it and be a more quick introduction of hot water to whatever fixture you're at. So instead of having to wait for that hot water to heat up a little bit and letting that cold water run, it'll be as soon as you turn that hot water on, you should wait a couple seconds and boom, you have your hot water. And that recirculating system comes back from the furthest fixture through the ceiling, through your mechanical room slab, and into your recirculating booster pump. recirculating booster pump is introduced back into the system, into your cold water feed, and back into your tank, so that instead of getting full cold water introduced into your hot water tank, it is more tempered water, so it conserves energy, conserves money, and is a lot more efficient on this tank being always on or not needing to always be on, because it's keeping the recirculating pump, it's keeping the water in the tank at a proper temperature. Aside from that, your expansion tank obviously takes care of the pressure inside the system itself, making sure that that is always at a proper level. Aside from that, that's really all we have here at this electrical water heater. Anything else aside from that automatic air vent, everything is pretty standard, and that's all that we would ever have to maintain or take care or do as far as the electrical water heater is concerned. We're going to go ahead and come over to a few pieces of control that control the recirc pump itself. The recirc pump is controlled by this switch. So if for any reason this needed to be serviced or taken a look at, this switch can be turned off and it'll knock this pump out of service, so that then you can operate it properly. This is all it is a disconnect switch. On the side of this disconnect switch, we see a red light on this relay. This pump is part of 3-4 other pumps that have ran through the Siemens system, control system. Siemens have full control of this pump. This pump is on a schedule, and the pumps themselves are on a separate schedule than any other piece of equipment. So all of these pumps work together and through the schedule set by Siemens to operate at a certain time of the day, kick on at a certain time of the day, to allow the water heater and the water in the system to be more efficient and everything work in a more efficient manner. This little red light, if Siemens schedule is calling for this pump to be on, you are going to see this red light on. The red light means that this relay is calling for this pump to be on and running. If this pump is not on and running while this red light is on, and this switch is not off, something's wrong with this pump. At that point, the proper installer or maintenance personnel need to be contacted and obviously turned off. Make sure there's no power going to the pump, and then taking the pump apart just consists of these 4 bolts, these 2 down here and the 2 bolts up here, and pulling it straight out, and you can see whether something's wrong with the pump or if it's a motor issue or whatever the case may be. But if this light is not on and this pump is not on and this switch is on, everything is working properly. At the end of the day, this red light on the relay is what should tell you whether this pump is on or off, since everything is controlled through a schedule by Siemens. Aside from that, guys, that concludes our recirculating system and our hot water system. You guys have a wonderful day. It's Felix Luna at Henry L. Marsh, G Mechanical Room. Have a nice day.